Usually I have a little intro talk. I've got no spoons. That is my intro talk. A sick kid. I'm dog sitting, so there's another dog here. And my teenager was like, this was the worst idea to dog sit. And I'm just laughing because I'm also getting a lot of information watching them interact and negotiate space. So my dog is Luna. She's like 15 months, and the other dog is smaller, Cashew, male. And like Luna has completely lost her place in this space. And it's like, I'm like, Luna, come on, be a little assertive. Have I taught you nothing about boundaries? So that's my talk. I'm going to stop sharing. What do we do when we have no spoons? We just keep going, not forcefully, but I like to bring in humor. Okay. Anyone have anything that they want some coaching around or support or witnessing? We can celebrate together too. This really nice conversation with a client who showed up to one of the meetings. She's white, and she'd left in middle. She never showed up her video. This was on Wednesday, and everyone else who had their video on was a person of color, minus one person who was white passing. And so I had named it, right? I was like, just notice the dynamics and what's happening inside, because we all have biases, right? And I sent an email and was like, just checking in, making sure you know you belong. I just had named it because it felt important, because I wanted to explain, some safety stuff. And she felt bad that I reached out. And I said, I'm not taking care of you. I'm not centering your comfort. I'm letting you know that I care about you. Right? And I create BIPOC only spaces on purpose because white women have historically bias, right? Been dangerous for people of color, particularly Black women. Okay. And so I just named it, and I was saying, the space that you came in is completely open to you, right? When I talk about these dynamics, I am talking about the dynamics that are around us all the time. But when we can name it and we can share our internal safety with other people, we create safety together, right? By being authentic, by being real, by being vulnerable. And so I was explaining it to her. She's just tears, right? Because she's also from an immigrant family. And that sense of not belonging lands in her body, right? But we don't know it because we don't know the story. And so the reason why these spaces are so precious to me is because I know a little bit of the stories, right? I'm able to intentionally make sure everyone knows they're safe and they're welcome, right? So we can practice how to be in right size in community when it's never been modeled to us, right? And I'm just sitting here, right? Zooming out the cultural historical context of pitting Black folks and Asian folks, and so I just want to name, if there's a charge, it's historical, right? And how do we share space so that everyone feels welcome, right? And one of the things I often do when I'm going out into the world is I overextend, in the sense of, like, especially when there's power differentials, of like making sure, not necessarily that I'm taking care of them, but I'm verbalizing my own vulnerability and where I am in the sense of safety so that other people can know, right? And so I just wanted to kind of put this here too, of it's a small group. You don't have to feel pressured to share, but I'm sharing something that came up that I thought was very tender, you know. The sense of belonging is really, really important, and it's a birthright. It's a birthright. Okay, and I hold it very, very it's at the center of these groups. Okay.
Hello.
Hi, Whitney. It's nice to see you again.
Likewise, likewise. So noticing, um, I guess a couple of things.
Hmm.
One is from the conversation yesterday
Hmm.
and figuring out like work experiences.
Hmm.
One of my friends shared an article that sort of went like right in line, and it brought me to like a bigger reflection of all the places I worked. And I'm just looking it up here. It was the concept, and I'm not sure if either of you have heard of this, but the concept of uh, pet to threat.
Pet to threat.
Yes. And I want to say the psychologist's name is Keisha, Kecia Thomas, but she was one of
I
the
see.
contributors. Yeah.
Hmm.
And I wasn't familiar with this concept. I guess apparently it came out over 10 years ago, but
Hmm.
it's essentially being hired, um, sometimes for diversity or, DI or whatever
Hmm.
the insert token position might be,
Yes. Hmm.
and how you're sort of revered for that initially upon hiring, or, people take interest or have an interest in helping you.
Like a mascot.
Exactly.
Hmm.
And the moment where that sort of shifts and either there's a block in resources or a block in access or accessibility to resources, also in just in terms of how people help you navigate the space.
Yes.
Um, and that was so interesting to think about working in predominantly white spaces, because
Hmm.
I've definitely, I just had kind of these reflections of tokenism, um, what it was to sort of be very like naive in those spaces and almost excited to be welcomed, because we were talking about, fitting in, right? And, for probably half of my career, there was like a excitement around being welcomed into those spaces, to where people could feel safe, like
Hmm.
with me or interacting, so much so that, I'm the one. And then there's like sort of the other half of it where it's like, okay, I am the one, but how am I being valued? So I started to have more just of those reflections around how was I valued in each of those roles, and
Yes.
how did I leave those places, I guess, more developed or
Hmm.
just different from when I entered in spite of those things.
Hmm.
And I guess just how to continue navigating it, because I feel like it's going to be in any environment for the most part that you walk into. And just that balance of not being burnt out by it, but being able to recognize it and still, more than function, right? Like, how can you?
Strategize.
Yes, okay,
Yes. Is that okay that I name that word?
absolutely,
Because
absolutely.
when I go into spaces, I assess for safety and I immediately strategize. Not as a antagonist, right?
Mm-hmm.
But as a neutralizer.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I use my body. How does that? I want to pause first and just notice, Whitney, what's happening in your body right now. You just shared so from pet to threat. And when I read that, I was like, oh, like a mascot, right?
Mm-hmm.
So objectifying, pet, right? And so just notice what's happening in your body as we talk about this. Do you notice any sensation in your body?
So it's like a a charge of energy, um, through my body,
Your whole
just like
body?
my whole body, in terms of like it. It's weird to say, but it's like a survival thing, right? Like you made it,
Yes. Yes.
you
Yes.
made it, you're still standing, you're able to also recognize it in reflection. And there's also a curiosity of how to better navigate it moving forward. And
Where's the curiosity though?
it's up here now, like, it's
Yes.
definitely in my brain. And you say strategy and it immediately,
Yes.
I start to think about how I've worked through that in spaces, how to
Yes.
strategize. So yeah.
So let's go back, okay?
Hmm.
Because we it's so interesting. I'm witnessing like when we got through the pandemic, we just rushed forward and to strategize. How did I get sick or whatever, right? We missed the whole of the I've survived, right? I have for me, and it's going to be feel different for everyone because they have a different connection to this, right? My hands are so hot. Okay. And so when we know there's a charge of survival, it means that there's an overabundance in our body of adrenaline and cortisol. What do we do with so much adrenaline and cortisol? We do not, my friend, breathe it out. Meditation is not the thing that we need for anxiety or like fight. Okay. We need to move our body. And so, Whitney, for you, I want you to see what your body wants to do. We've have we done the twisting? Okay, so the twisting is one way of getting that fight or flight out, right? Other ways is like stomping or pushing against a wall or like shaking our whole body. What's the impulse for your particular body? And we'll join you there.
I actually like want to walk around for a moment.
Let's
Yeah.
do it. Okay.
Okay.
Is
All
that
right.
okay? You can turn off the video or I'm gonna walk back and forth because my headphones are connected. Okay. So the thing I want us to remember is our bodies are very wise. So you just follow the impulse and you don't have to know why. So I want you to walk in your space, Whitney, however you want. Enjoy. If there's another impulse for you, I want you to do it. Okay? Because this is all connected. Everyone has a different, but it's the same feeling, right? If I survived. Pause. What's coming up? What happened now in your body?
It's just like there's excitement. There's like
Excitement. Where?
yeah, I can feel it in my feet still a little bit from walking, I think.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, Hands,
Hmm.
sort of like in the extremities actually. Like
Is it like kind of like dancing? Like, oh my God, I
exactly.
survived,
And
right?
I started to like do this as I was walking.
Good. Okay, good.
Mhm.
I'm going to give another experience. When I was walking, I almost started crying. Because when we survive, it means the opposite could have been true. So there's grief, right? The reason why I'm bringing in the different experiences is because when we connect to generational trauma, we're going to have to clear it out differently. And so for Whitney, it's like, oh, we made it. So maybe it's this like excitement and like, okay, what do I create now? What do I do with this energy that I have, right? And this, right? That might be there, right? And so for me, I'm going to have to get the grief out, right? The thing is, there's this phrase that I always use. I often forget because I get dysregulated, just like everybody else. Okay. Nothing wrong with me. Nothing wrong with you. What's the data telling me? Okay. And so if it's, okay, I'm getting excited, what's this data telling me? Right. Or if I left this space and I'm feeling confused, what's the data telling me? Okay. Because regardless of what happened, right? The people, this is the key, the core, foundation, same size. Even if they were unsafe and mean, you're going to look at the behavior, but never demean, which does not mean do not hold accountable or set boundaries. Okay. The reason is whatever we think about other people, if we can diminish them or enlarge them and put them on a pedestal, right? We do the same things with ourselves. And that means that we connect our value with something external. That's why there are people who are resource hoarding because they think they're more valuable than others, right? Or we prop up athletes or superstars or what because they are like up on this pedestal, right? Their shit stinks like yours and mine, right? Like, let's not forget this, right? this idolatry of class, this idolatry of elitism, this idolatry of like one way is better than another is the why we're in this mess. Does that make sense? How is this landing in you, Whitney, as I just go on this like tangent? Does it make sense? How is it? What are you feeling in your body, or what are some thoughts that are coming in?
It's it's a reminder. I keep having a reminder of, because I have a want to with rights, like, when I think of right sizing, how to do that without making smaller, or when the defense kicks in, how to still regulate and go to
Mm-hmm.
resource,
Mm-hmm.
and just trying to create those tools and reminders, because I know like that's what's popping out is, just the best way to do that, because I have struggled to do
Mm-hmm.
that
Yeah,
for
me
sure.
too. Right?
Yes.
Does it make you
And
bad?
no.
No.
And it has helped too. It helps. It helps to regulate it, but the balance of, you said it too. It's like you can still feel the anger, the disappointment. You can still hold someone accountable, but then, there's the other piece of we are still equal.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so the downsizing, right, is from this to this. So part of this dynamic too is the experience that one feels, right? I was just in a group earlier, a group that I'm part of. I'm not the facilitator for. And it's a financial, like trying to like understand how to invest and, business stuff so I can understand this. And one of the things that they talked about was like, how do we make $1 million every day or whatever? And I was like, and this other person was like, and I wasn't able to do it. So I felt bad about myself. And I was like, and I did my little spiel about the right sizing. And I'm like, this drive, this strive for this like next shiny thing, right, is what's causing this. Like, and I was like, if we can all see our value is not contingent on the external, like it's an opportunity to keep reminding ourselves of our humanity, right? And the person was like, what I hear, Judy, is you're saying you're a victim. And it makes me feel heavy and like I'm a victim, right? And what I didn't say, because she was the facilitator and I haven't figured out safety yet, because we've had a few mishaps that I think are all opportunities, because everything I'm saying is like getting into other people in the group. Because I'm going in and like quietly disrupting. Like, do you really? Yeah, And so how I saw it was she was like, I feel like a victim, or I feel like heavy, like I can't. She was going to right size. But what she was saying was, I was doing this to her, right? And so it's you reminding yourself, right? Yes, you don't bring them down to this, and you do bring them down to this, right? So one of the models of how we write, or how we've learned to respond to people when they're mean to us, is how we were parented when we make mistakes or when someone else makes a mistake. That's the model that we quickly go to, because that's from our wounded child. We learned, is it safe to make mistakes or not? Does it make you bad or good, right? Or if in childhood your academic success or your athletics or your, you know, people pleasing or your smile or your appearance or whatever garnered attention, that would experience as, oh, so when I'm good, I'm going to be bigger. I'm going to be the golden child of the family, right? Or when I'm bad, I'm going to be the black sheep, right? Neither of them are healthy, because it's not the authentic person who's going to be making mistakes, right? Or not. Does that make sense? And so when you're like, Whitney, my feedback is when you go, I do this, I like shrink them down and I'm working against it. This is an opportunity to go, where did you learn it from? And you want to heal that in one of your wounded children and go, oh, stories. I'm just going to tell stories. I don't know your story. Oh, little one, I'm so sorry that you were responded to so harshly when you made a mistake. That was so scary. And that was not okay. And I'm not going to let anyone do that to you when you make a mistake. Coworkers, right? I'm not going to let anyone do that to you when you make a mistake. And I'm not going to let anyone gaslight you when they make a mistake and you bring it to their attention. Only look to me for your safety now. Because you are not a pet nor a threat. You are a human being and you are beloved. And we need not do anything to prove that to anybody. Does that make sense? So the tricky thing with this dynamic of oppressor, victim, perpetrator, victim, right, is we internalize both. And so we flip back and forth, right? Of what an asshole, oh, perpetrator. Why would they do that to me? Right? This victim. And so it's understanding, what am I bringing to the dynamic moment by moment? Right? So I'm going to use myself as an example. I historically have viewed myself as a victim because my mom presented herself as a victim. Okay, so I learned that dynamic. My mom, and I'm right sizing, I love this person, right? So much trauma that went undone, right? That's why I'm here doing this work. Would kind of focus on that. So when I would enter spaces, I would be like this. Really? You're letting me? Thank you. You know? And so I would train people to treat me like very careful or like a little, oh, Judy, you're so sweet, right? It's a safety tactic too, right? So then when I would have a grown-up observation or an observation from they would experience it like, why are you so critical? Right? Because they would also put on the the high expectation Asian lady, like, and so I was part of that dynamic. Does that make sense? Which fit perfectly with what they were experiencing in childhood or their place in society too. Does that make sense? What comes up for you?
Uh, it's it's um it's affirming in that it like confirms that thought process of, if this type of thing where you are noticing the dynamic is occurring in multiple spaces, then I have something to do with that, right? Like
Yes.
I'm a common denominator
Mm-hmm.
because I'm in all of those situations. So
Mm-hmm.
it's definitely affirming to hear that and have it be, it's just a thing, right? It's okay. It's
Yeah.
exactly. And to
You're
sort
not
of be able to
defective.
just shrug it,
Right.
right? To shrug it off in a way. Still acknowledge it, but you know, it just makes sense of it. And it's helpful when things just are like, ah, it's named.
Yes.
Because it's crazy making when you're in it and it happens and you can't really place, especially with the amount of activity or just like responsibility, there's not always that moment to make sense of it. So that's like,
Mm-hmm.
it's just really affirming to hear it and to have it make sense.
Mm-hmm.
And it
Mm-hmm.
puts me at ease that like
Yeah.
I can actually do it.
Yeah, you can do something about it.
Exactly.
Of like, oh, I'm downsizing myself right now. Let me right size
Yes.
myself and let me downsize them, right? And go, oh, thank you, teenager and wounded child. This downsizing and upsizing was actually a way to be safe, right? Not to get vulnerable and connected because you didn't want to be hurt. Does that make
Yes,
sense? So it's like that
100%.
opportunity to reparent yourself exactly the way you need it. So every opportunity, so when you go through your past jobs, Whitney, this is an opportunity to go, where are these breadcrumbs leading me? What I mean by that is, I'm an excellent boundary coach and this dynamic because my childhood was so many layers of boundary crossings, right? Which is connected also to my family of origin story, ancestry story of crossing of violations and where is home and right. And so, why I bring this up right now is for me, when I was able to click it all together of like, oh, this is why I'm doing this work. It's my calling because I am not only cycle breaking, I am alchemizing all of this stuff generationally into this manifestation today. Every time I say it, I get chills, right? And I don't have to sacrifice my life. I don't have to like go and dig and look for all the skeletons and I can go, oh, I'm not going to waste any of those sacrifices or that trauma. I'm going to totally embody my full humanity with this joy. Yes, grief and joy and live. Right? Does that make sense? And that connection is actually very exciting. It's like energizing, right? When I put it all together. So I want you to consider, Whitney, as you're looking for your next thing, if you can look at these breadcrumbs or like puzzle pieces to kind of fit together, what is this trying to lead you to? Because our ancestors are always with us, right? We think maybe like, oh, this bad thing happened. It's like, that's depending on your perspective, right? So good. Thank you for sharing that.
I have something to share, but
Mhm. So let me
at,
just do a pause in between. I just realized this. I'm like, oh my God, I don't have water. Everyone take a sip of water or like kind of. So what we're doing is we're creating space because sometimes the energy can like kind of go into something else. So we're just making sure our nervous system gets a little like, you know, go ahead, Joy. Thank you.
um, I think this is a little hard for me to share. And we've talked about this briefly, but I'm having a hard time with, um, I guess the experiencing the genocide on Palestinians have really
Mhm.
affected me, has really
Mhm.
affected me, and like really changed a lot of my thoughts and
Mhm.
awareness on many different areas. And um, I think I'm having a hard time not, I don't know if it's possible not to feel this way, but I feel betrayed by a lot of friends that I thought were close or even family members.
Mhm.
Um, So I'm not sure really what to do in that area. I've just I've broken off a couple of friendships and kind of like held some other people at a distance.
Mhm.
Um, and at the same time, I've made a lot of other friends. So yeah, it's like really hard to have this like big shift in my life.
Mhm.
Um, and as like a people pleaser. And when you were talking about um, just like being in a space where you're normally like kind of like invisible or quiet, now,
I I am normally invisible or quiet. Is it okay to use I? Yeah, go ahead.
oh yes, I am normally invisible or
Mhm.
quiet. And now I have this very strong opinion and like just I'm like very unwavering on my stance. And I think some people are maybe like uncomfortable with that. I'm not sure, obviously, but
So I want you to pause, Joy, and notice what's happening in your body as you share that. I have a very strong opinion and I can't be invisible and quiet about it. Where do you feel it in your body?
I feel it in my heart.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
So let's put our hands there. Just notice. What's the emotion?
Grief,
Mm-hmm.
scared,
Mm-hmm.
sad.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Who's driving the bus?
Wounded child,
Mm-hmm.
probably teen as well.
Mm-hmm. What is the wounded child realizing? Or so the reason why I go, where do you feel it in your body? Who's driving the bus, right? What's the emotion? Is because we have muscle memory from trauma, including generations past. Okay. So with epigenetics, we discovered epigenetics from researching mice. Okay. That there was a group of lab mice who were shocked after they would get the scent of cherry blossom. So cherry blossom, shock. Cherry blossom, shock. Okay. And the scientists bred those mice, and the baby mice and the baby's baby mice, right, would just get the cherry blossom scent and they would scatter. None of them ever were shocked. Okay. And so epigenetics is something in our DNA changes to adapt to the trauma. Okay. So when I'm going, where do you feel it in your body? What's the emotion and who's driving? I'm looking for this lifetime, this experience. Is it connected to other stuff? Right? Because this genocide, this trauma that's happening right now has always happened on different lands. Right? So the reason why I'm bringing this up is I want you also to go, was there a betrayal when I was a child with my parents, right? Was there a betrayal of my people in another land, right? So it's what you're doing is you're constantly going in and out, so you can kind of see the whole landscape. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So when you feel, okay, now we're kind of going back to you. When you feel into your body and the wounded child, is it from a familial connection? So a parent or a caregiver that might have, betrayed you or told you a different story than what you learned? And does that make sense? And you don't have to say who, but just does that land at all?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. What's happening now is you just named, yes, that happened to me.
It feels a little more clarifying to make that connection.
Yes. How so?
Well, it's like I'm being reminded of some of the times where I was betrayed by my parents.
Yes.
And I lost, some trust there.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
like carrying that into my current relationships, that makes more sense.
Yes. Right. And so one of the stories that I make up is if that was the primary attachment blueprint, right? If we were taught in childhood, we don't question anything, we just accept this as the truth, okay? That intimate relationships might not be safe. We're going to pick friends or people who have that resonance of maybe they won't be safe and maybe they'll betray me later because it's familiar. I know what to do in that dynamic. Does that make sense?
Yes.
How does that land?
It's very interesting.
Yeah.
I thought of it like that.
Yeah. So just notice what's happening in your body, because I'm kind of putting a lot out right now. Okay. I don't want to blow out your nervous system. Is this what's happening as you're going, oh, I didn't think about that?
Yeah, I feel like I have to take more time to like think through this and make more connections in my head.
So let me zoom out. Okay. When I work with people and we do the boundary assessment and I figure out like the dynamics between their parents and them, right, in childhood, I use this example. So if a child was raised in a domestically violent home, right, when they grow up and they meet someone, I'm not saying this is what happened to you. When they grow up and they meet someone romantically, if that person is like, oh my gosh, you're amazing, and like super regulated and even keeled and like affirming and always about consent, and, I'm going to be like, I'm so bored. There's nothing here for me, because my nervous system is wired for the intensity or the patterning of that dynamic of violence, right? So when I say, is this familiar to you on some level in your childhood, right? It's because if it's calling there and you can go, oh, yes, what happens for me is it's like the Matrix, like, and then I get super clear on my body and what I'm experiencing. Does that make sense? So for me, when I look at the genocide that's happening in many lands right now, I go, oh, my parent centered their ego over my safety because of trauma, controlled me, because then it was like, even though they saw that I was in pain, they were like, fuck, like, this is what needs to happen. This is right. So it crossed my boundary. Okay. The context culturally was communism in China. Okay. And so it was the upending of the people who had money or education were now the worst people, and the people who were poor and didn't have education were on top, right? And what happened during the communist takeover with Chairman Mao was that he instructed all of his people, aka his children, to melt all of the steel into bullets for this war. The result was mass starvation, the centering of ego over humans. Does that make sense? And so when I see what's happening, I keep connecting to my lineage and keep clearing that out and go, not again, right? So when I speak up for Palestine, when I talk about it and post on my social media, it's not just about Palestine. It's about the millions of people who were lost from my ancestry. Does that make sense? What's happening in your body, Joy? I just gave you a lot. What's happening?
Yeah.
Are you in your body, or is this overwhelming?
I'm in my body.
Okay.
Just sad.
Yeah, that makes total sense. It's heartbreaking. Put your hand back there, right? Make sure you're grounded so the roots are in the earth and it's pulling this intensity from you. Does that make sense? And so as you're losing connections with people because of this strong opinion, it's right sizing, right? So this is you. You used to be like quiet and invisible because that's what Asian women are supposed to be. It's invisible and helpful, right? As you now take up your right size and have a strong opinion, people who might have been used to you being invisible and helpful are just moving further away, right? No one can abandon you because you're a grown up now, right? And so as these connections get more distant, because those two realities can't exist at the same time, right? Like, but these other people were there before, like it's like, I support LGBTQ and I'm gonna vote for someone who's like anti-trans. Like that cannot coexist in the same, you know what I mean? It's like I can't. It's driving me crazy, As you stand in your truth and allow these relationships, because everyone has a choice. If they're willing to wake up or not, it's their choice, right? Other people are going to come, right? New people are going to come, and then you're going to actually feel like you have a real tribe, a real group of people you can connect with in your authenticity, who's able to handle the intensity of wanting to talk about this all the time. What is more important, right?
Yeah.
Not about, it's like, how can we have all been asleep for so long? How is this okay for everybody, And the thing is, what you're doing is you're preparing your nervous system to tolerate the discomfort of other people's discomfort. Because tolerating someone else's discomfort might not have been safe before as a child, right? So for me to like stand up to my mom was like, get out of the family, or she was going to threaten to hurt herself. That was not safe to make her uncomfortable, right? But now I'm like, hi, mom, you got a queer daughter, right? So uncomfortable. And the reason why I'm doing it is in case my kids might be. I've got to prepare my body by vetting for safety. I'm not going to let just anyone get close to me and my kids. If they cannot celebrate me and my kids, they cannot share my intimate space. Does that make sense? So you are preparing your nervous system, Joy, to tolerate discomfort in order to be authentic. And guess who benefits?
Me.
Yes, you, which is amazing, right? But often our
kids.
our kids, right? And I always bring in our kids because as moms, it's like, you don't have any needs. But if I talk about the kids, they're like, oh, I'll do it for the kids. That makes sense. Does that resonate?
Yes,
Yeah, I'll
absolutely.
do it. Fine. I'll do my healing for the kids. Yeah. How are you doing in your body now?
Better.
What do you feel in your body?
I think a little less pressure off my chest and my heart.
Mm-hmm.
Still a little bit tense in my shoulders.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So my suggestion is don't convince anyone. They have access to the news. Don't waste your precious energy. Go look for people who are like, yes, right? And then keep doing the visualizing work of clearing your own ancestral harm. Because that's what this is bringing up for people. But when we just focus on Palestine, or just Congo or just Sudan or just, we're missing our responsibility to just do our piece of the work, right? So when we resonate with other people, it's because it brings up something in us and we have to look back. We don't have to, but when we look back and clear that out, then there's more relief on our body because we're actually going in the right direction. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And then what happens is when I clear it out, I have the support and the connection of my ancestors, and I am strong. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah. Can I ask a question?
Mm-hmm.
When you talked about how we sometimes look for friends or relationships that mimic our relationship with our parents, or
Mm-hmm.
whether or not that was like a safe relationship, in order to eventually find friends that are safe, we have to like heal, I guess, our trauma with our parents. Is that right? Or
Mm.
not?
Are you
Okay.
saying we have to heal it first before we make the new friends?
Um,
Or that you have to heal the trauma directly with your parents?
the first one, but like if we want to make friends that are like good for us,
Mm-hmm.
we have to heal that trauma, right?
Yeah, and we heal it through vulnerability. Okay. So if I'm going to use an example, if it was unsafe for me to be honest with my parent when I was a child, I'm not going to be honest with relationships. Like, oh, that hurt my feelings, but it's not a big deal, right? How I vet for safety is from the very beginning. And I just am like, oh, I don't want, I like, no, actually, this doesn't, can we actually switch things? And I don't do it like to be a jerk, but I'm just like, oh, when you said this thing, is that what you meant? Right? I very quickly start pushing boundaries. I'm turning 50 this year. I got no time to waste. So when I meet someone, I'm like, how are you with conflict? Like, will you tell me if I cross a boundary with you? You crossed the boundary with me. I don't agree with your opinion, right? I do it in a nonviolent way as much as I can, but then I watch the response. Okay. And the response is not a reflection of my value. It's about the possible, the potential for the healing in me by being able to say, I'm only going to let people in, right? Who can have authentic conversation and conflict with me. Because it's the only way to grow trust in a relationship is through conflict. Only way. Does that make sense? So the healing actually happens at the same time. Because we need to challenge the belief system of the wounded child that relationships are unsafe or people are unsafe. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So when we find someone and we test it and go, okay, they were able to do that, and then we get to keep growing that pattern and go, oh, that wasn't helpful. This person wasn't. Not that I like discard them, because that's also something to be careful about. But it's like I'm able to protect myself, right? I hold them in their right size, but they're not able to do the dynamic in the ways that is going to create safety for me, right? And so you're building trust that you can keep yourself safe.
Mm-hmm.
Not that other people are safe, that you can keep yourself safe. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does.
Good.
Thank you.
All right, friends. Stay strong, but please take good care. Okay.